So you're driving down the road and you see a for sale sign and it happens to be a house that you really want to look at. We've all been there, right? And you notice that there's a listing agent and you wonder, should I call them directly or do I get my own? And you're not sure what to do? Today on the podcast, we are going to give you 10 questions to ask an agent before you hire them to make sure that you are getting the service that you deserve. Let's dive in. You're listening to the Girl, Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast, where we invite you to check your ego at the app, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to dive into all things real estate marketing, social media, friendship, hardship, love, money mindset, and all the things that celebrate you as a badass boss babe.
We're here to encourage you, show up for you, give you a loving kick in the pants when you need it most, and be your soft place to land on the hardest of days. So pull up a seat at our table and get ready to be inspired and start living your best life by design.
Welcome to the Girl, Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast. We are so excited you're here.
Okay, girls, let's dive in. All right, we've all been there. And
have you been there, Beth?
I am. Yeah. I was
I'm just kidding. I know you were.
Well, I was actually licensed before I bought my first house, which I feel like is a disservice to clients. That's a whole nother podcast episode. We'll talk about that on another day. But like, think of all the people that want to buy a house and you're like, what do you do? Who do I call? Do I call my aunt's cousin's best friend that just got a real estate license?
My friend just got into the business. Maybe I should call them.
Yeah.
Or
do I call the guy on the billboard or like
the guy?
Who do I call?
Hey Beth, who's the guy on the billboard?
Oh, you know who I'm talking about.
You see what I'm doing here?
Yeah. You know who I'm talking about. Or like, how do you sift through that? Because in Minnesota, there's 14,000 licensed agents. And I mean, think about like California, there's probably over 100,000. Florida has an insane amount. How do you figure it out?
And like another thing is if you're like going to go look at an open house in the neighborhood that you like, and you're like afraid to like call a realtor or whatever. So you show up and then you like the house. Well, what do you do then? You need to be ready. So we're going to break down 10 questions that you need to ask a realtor before you hire them. For sure. Yeah.
It's interesting that like the stage that I'm at in my career, no one asks me these questions. I think most of my business comes from past clients and referrals, but I did encounter a girl from second grade, and she and her sister were interviewing two different agents to sell their parents' house because their parents both died last year, which is so sad. And they sent a big, huge list of questions. And I was like, thank you for asking. Yeah. Nobody asks me these questions anymore, but I would be happy to share.
Well, we're also educating on a regular basis. And so a lot of this information is probably already out there. So, I mean, there is that. If you can collect this information without actually asking some of it, sure. That does make sense.
Well,
but
you know, you're going to get a good sense of someone. But there's plenty of people on social media that do a good social media game, only finding out, or like on social media, it looks like they're really like killing it and crushing it.
Can we just talk about that? Can we talk about if they're posting that they're working a ton, they're probably not working a ton.
Right.
Okay.
But then me as a realtor, I can go on behind the scenes and see how many how many properties someone sold. Mm-hmm. And so you might be able to fool people, but if someone's asking like in-depth questions,
it's hard to
fool.
And this is your money. This is your asset. Like this is a lot of times like your biggest asset that you have in life. The questions need to happen. You need these answers before you can move forward.
And don't leave it to chance. And don't just take someone else's word for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Referral says a lot, but you also need to do your due diligence with that referral.
Yep.
All right. So let's dive into these questions.
So first one is so elementary, but so many people never ask. How long have you been in the business?
Ooh, good one.
Yeah. It's super straightforward. And just because someone is newer in the business doesn't mean that they're not successful.
What does their network look like?
Right.
What sort of, like, how are they building their business and that kind of thing.
And on the flip side of that, just because someone's been in the business a long time doesn't mean they're great at their craft either.
Had that experience myself buying our land.
Oh my word.
God.
Yeah. Okay, number 2. Do you specialize in working with buyers or sellers?
Such a good one. So this is so important. And I think this
like,
gets
say
overlooked.
you're looking for someone to list your house and sell your house, and then you work with an agent that really only specializes in buyers and they really haven't worked with any sellers. Completely different nuances.
So this is something that was a really big learning experience for me on the team, seeing how like an agent could come on and be really good with buyers, but you're going to all the listings, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, because they can't actually do it yet.
Right.
It is like something you really need to learn and like fine tune and get really good at. And it takes a while for that to happen.
Yep.
That does not happen overnight.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. It's a whole different skill set. Like listing homes versus working with buyers. Here's a great one. And this one is a little bit more, this could go either way for buyers and sellers, but how this question is posed is a little bit more of like for sellers. Like, how many homes have you sold in my price range?
So good. These are so good.
If you want to buy a home, you can say, like, what's the price point that you specialize in?
Yes.
Because if you are working with a buyer's agent and they really only sell townhomes and condos, and you want to buy a $600,000 or $700,000 house or $1 million house, do they have enough wherewithal and knowledge to be able to negotiate a bigger deal?
Also, if you have a lower price point, are they aware of what's going on in that specific...
And how competitive it is.
And how competitive it is.
Yeah.
So there's both sides to that.
Yeah, and you have to know all the nuances. All the nuances.
And it's not to say one agent can't do all of that. It's not to say that at all. Just making sure that they are well-versed in all areas.
Right. So this one, how many homes do you sell a year? I would say if you ask, like, agents many times inflate their numbers to make it look like they're busier than what they are.
Yes.
And I don't think it's because they're intentionally trying to be liars. I don't think most people have that motive. But sometimes it's embarrassing to say if you didn't have a great year and you only sold a handful of houses. But like in that situation with the girl from second grade, the guy that I was up against on that deal only sold 2 houses last year.
Oh.
And then you could see so like when I log in online, you can see anyone's performance, but it easily pulls up the last 2 years of history. And he has only sold 7 houses in the last 2 years total.
That's just not a very experienced agent. Well, so do you want to work with them?
Right. And how... I get everybody has to be new at some point, but this guy says he sells full time. And he's been in the business for a number of years.
Is he selling $10 million properties?
No. And there's no way that you're selling full time and selling 7 houses a year that are in the $100,000 to $400,000 price point. You are not making a livable wage.
I mean, if you live in your parents' basement in a tiny little room, you could probably make that a livable wage.
It's just not possible.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, after you pay your fees and you pay your broker and everything, it's not even a part-time job.
No.
This is like your hobby.
Where are you putting your energy? Really, you probably have another job, which how much time are you actually spending?
But then if you tell your client that you're working full time, so like that's where like when you just kind of keep asking these questions, you're peeling back the onion.
Yeah.
And you're really getting to the root of like, do I want to trust my $500,000 home purchase to someone that this seems like this might be their hobby and not their career?
I mean, I don't.
Right. But that's what this list of questions is supposed to help. And if you're an agent listening to this, you need to be able to answer all these questions with confidence.
Yeah. And if you are a newer agent and you're like, well, I don't have the numbers to back it, what do you have to back it up with? How are you going to make sure it still works for them?
Are
if
you
really
working
want
with
them?
a mentor? Are you on a team? Like what is going to give your buyer confidence that you actually know what you're doing? We all have to be new at some point, right? Like that. that's just a thing. But how are you going to give a buyer or seller confidence that you actually know your craft and you're learning your craft and you're actively engaging in your education?
You know, it goes to, like you mentioned, an agent that's been in the business for a long time, but refuses to change with the times. And I'm not techie. Like, okay, cool. You don't have to be techie, but are you working with people that are working in your business for you?
Hey,
because there's that
old-timer.
disconnect.
Nobody uses faxes anymore.
Oh, that's what?
I can't even tell you how many people are like, I'll fax it to you. Dude, nobody has fax machines anymore.
Wow.
Do you have the scanner app on your iPhone? You can be 75 and still figure that out.
Absolutely you can. And there are agents crushing it doing that. Yeah.
I did a real estate transaction just closed last week, and the agent on the other side of the transaction, I find these old timers love to tell you how long they've been in the business. And I'm like, oh yeah, great, Mr. Agent. That's awesome. And you're asking me if I have a fax machine. Oh, Jeez Louise. It's terrifying.
I mean, they probably pick up their phone though.
He does, because he's nothing else going on.
Which is nice, yeah.
It's nice, but he didn't know nuances of even like new language in the contracts and all of that.
Ooh.
It was me doing most of the
Which
transaction.
Which is the red flags that you're not seeing as a buyer or seller. The other agent's seeing
the
them.
other agent's
So these are why
seeing
these questions are so necessary.
Right. So next one. Will I be working with you directly or your team?
Also great.
Yeah. So a lot of times clients, they don't want to just like, you go there and you're like the rainmaker on the team and you go to the meeting and you razzle dazzle the clients and then you just pass them off to another agent, never for them to see the whites of your eyes again. Mm-hmm. Terrible. Like, that's a super legitimate question. Am I going to be dealing with you directly, or like, what's that going to look like?
Yeah. And if I'm not dealing with you directly every single time, what does this process look like for me, and how much of you do I get?
Yeah.
So, so important.
Be able to answer that. This one is such a good question. So, like, have you ever had anything go wrong in a deal, and how did you handle it?
Oh.
Because stuff is going to go wrong.
It goes wrong. You don't win every time. Like, let's be real.
But like, how are you handling hard conversations? How are you handling things that, if a transaction's a little bit bumpy, like, how are you handling this? And what can I expect from this? Like, how are we going to troubleshoot it? Mm-hmm. Do you have my best interests at mind? And like, are we going to get through this?
I love that it's actually asking for an example, because it would be very easy to say things, they work out. I know what I'm doing and they work out. No, you can know what you're doing and things still happen.
Right.
It's part of this business. It's part of life.
Right.
So someone that can be honest and really share that.
Yeah. Okay. How many clients are you currently working with?
Also great. These are so good.
Yeah. So sometimes agents are so busy that and they're spread too thin, mm-hmm. and maybe they don't have a support staff behind them. Maybe they're just like a true solo agent, solopreneur, no support staff, no buyer's agent, and they're just like a one-man show doing it all. And you're working with 10 clients. Are you going to truly give those clients like really VIP service?
No, you're not.
But on the flip side of that, just being the only client maybe tells people that you don't have enough tools in your tool belt because you don't have enough deals.
Yeah.
And you don't have enough experience of like working different kinds of transactions. So it's kind of like being like that, having like that middle ground.
Yeah.
You want to know that you're not the only client, that the agent has other business going on, but being just one of 50 maybe isn't the greatest either. No. It's a great question to ask.
It's a great question.
How do you get paid? I mean, there's all this in our lawsuit going on right now, and it's really like a big deal, and there hasn't been a lot of transparency, some states more than others. I heard that there was like that Minnesota was one of 14 states that had the buyer representation contract in place. And I heard a new stat yesterday that we are one of 7.
Wow.
Both. If it's either 7 or 14, both of those numbers are really low. So think of all the rest of the states that don't have buyer representation contracts before you start working with a buyer. Of course, the buyer has questions about how you're getting paid because it's not spelled out in a contract. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more easy to understand like in a listing contract because it's spelled out in black and white. But if you live in one of these states, it makes sense why these lawsuits are happening because people are not aware of like how everybody gets paid.
And
where
you
does
need
the
to,
money go?
You need to be okay with sharing that information.
Yeah.
It is part of business. It doesn't need to be hidden. Like, you're paying me to do this. I'm not showing up for free. Like, I have a business.
Yeah.
Articulate what that looks like. Like, there's no reason they can't ask that question.
And if you're showing your value, there should be absolutely no reason why you are feeling nervous when that question comes up.
Exactly.
You should easily be able to answer that question. And now more than ever, who knows what things are going to look like come July 1st. But if you are scared to have that conversation, you need to put on your big boy pants as an agent and figure it out, because more clients are going to be asking that question. If they're not now, they will be.
Yes.
And buyers and sellers, ask the question.
Ask it. Don't fear it. On either end.
Absolutely not.
Don't
You need to
fear
know
it.
exactly where the money is going.
You
and
have
how.
a right to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what am I getting for my money?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you should be getting the service that you're paying for.
1,000%.
Yes.
Yeah. And number 10, and this is one that I ask all the time, in all different arenas of my life. What questions should I be asking that I don't even know that I should be asking?
I love this question.
I do too. And I ask it all the time. I asked it just recently. I don't even remember where it was. It was, I can't even tell you what the setting was, but it was something where it wasn't my wheelhouse. I knew enough to be dangerous, but it's like, what else should I be asking you? Mm-hmm. This is what you do all day long. I am not an expert in this space. Tell me what I should be asking you.
I asked this question yesterday, actually.
Oh, you did?
I did.
What was it in relation to?
When we were talking to our driveway guy.
Oh,
and I
cool.
was like, so what else? Like, I didn't say exactly, but what else do I need to know that, like, I'm new to this? Like, what else do I need to know?
Yes.
Like, what am I missing? Like, tell me.
Yeah.
Because I want to know.
Right. So
I'm
if you're a
not an
buyer or
expert.
seller, a good agent loves to educate.
Yes.
And they will be able to articulate this and share stuff that you haven't covered so far in your meeting. Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid to ask these questions. This is a huge purchase. It's a big deal. Buying or selling houses can be really stressful. It can really put people out of their element. And if you're armed with information and you really have confidence in that person that you've hired, the transaction's going to go so much easier.
Reminds me of weddings. The wedding can bring out the best and worst in everyone.
Yes.
It's very similar.
Same.
Yeah. So if you're a realtor listening to this, then be prepared for all of these questions and be okay with it. I mean, educate your clients through the process. Like, give them a reason why they should be working with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I love this list.
I know. Me
So
too.
good. All right. So those are 10 things you need to be asking your realtor before you hire them.
Yep.
Even if you're driving by that sign and you're really excited about that house, like, do this first.
And if you're walking into a new construction, God forbid, before you just like sign your life away when you're at that pretty model house, don't ever forget the agent that works there does not work for you. They work for the builder.
We should do an episode and just have that be the only thing. And that's it. Like 30 seconds and that's it. Because that is something that we've been educating on for quite a while.
Yeah.
It's a big miss.
It's a big miss.
And it's a big regret people have.
All the time.
All the time. So, all right. 10 things. You've got this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Feel free to call it Be Pure Experience and we'll answer these for you. No problem.
No problem.
All right. So until next time, bus bench babes.
Keep your face off a bus bench.
And keep being the badass boss babe that you are. Okay, girls. Are you feeling as inspired as we are? We're over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of the Girl, Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast.
If you want more, head over to girlgetyourfaceoffabusbench.com for show notes and more episodes. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. They mean the world to us and they're what keep us going.
Girl, thanks for being here.